Peace and love, family. So, welcome to episode 46 of Manned Up Conversations. My name is Khawkhelo Habiani, and I'm really honored, man, to speak to this man, Tuggle, who's the author and the editor of Cultural Silence and Wounded Souls, Black Men Speak About Mental Health. Now, Tuggle is a contemporary descendant of enslaved Africans in America. He's a same-gender-loving spiritual being with a strong sense of justice. He's also an activist, he's a brother, he's an educator, a friend, a humanitarian, a mentor, son, and a writer. Right, so a whole lot of things in there. But I think all in all, man, from what I got from speaking to the man and meeting and connecting with him is he's a really solid man who, is doing a lot of great work in the community in terms of making the plight for Black men to speak about what we're going through and what we're feeling without feeling guilty, without feeling shame, without being kind of ostracizing each other for having feelings, right? So I really hope that you enjoy this, man. We explore, various topics in this. Of course, we talk about the importance of developing a language around how we feel. We talk about the culture of silence and the state of mental health in Black communities. We highlight the cost of speaking the truth and also what it takes to be vulnerable. So there's a whole lot of discussion that we're having in this, but of course, we want you to let us know in the comments, man. What do you think about what we're talking about? Do you believe in some of the stuff that we're sharing here? And how does it benefit you? What's your idea of mental health? What do you disagree with? And let's have a chat. Hit us up in the comments, let us know. And make sure you go and copy Mr. Tuggle's book. You'll find the link to the Amazon page down here in the description of the video. So I really hope you enjoy it. Peace and love. And there's something you said to me as well in preparation to this is, we never had a language for this, or not never. I think some people still struggle with a language, right? A common language of expressing what it is I'm feeling in the moment. Whereas words like pissed off, words like triggered, easily exist in our vocabulary. But stuff like I'm hurt, I'm disappointed, I'm embarrassed. Those words are not so easy for us to speak of, especially Black men. Is that part of the whole silence that we grew up around? Definitely, because we knew instinctively to express our pain on the plantation would lead to more death, more brutalization. We were already, our families were split apart. We didn't have our original names. Our religion was taken away, our art, our music, our science, our math. Just our beauty as a people was just completely severed. And so we were silenced. And so we never learned how to talk about how we feel. And somehow we internalized this idea that for a man to talk about how he feels makes him weak or soft. He's a punk, he's bitch ass, so forth and so on. You talked about hip hop yesterday and how hip hop culture has influenced and has shaped our ideas about manhood, masculinity. Yeah. So there's this idea that for us to talk about how we feel, it's really a lot of fear about what will happen. If I tell you that I'm hurt, how will you treat me? How will you regard me? Will you hurt me again? So we don't feel safe. Historically, we have not felt safe talking about how we feel on stolen property. Man. And now, you have your own journey with mental health. Yes. And I think you said you were diagnosed with depression, and this was early 90s, right? I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety and moderate depression in February of 1995. And when I think back to that date, exactly. I'm thinking back to that date. I'm like, I didn't even know people are talking about depression. People are talking about anxiety. It's now a thing where everyone has some kind of definition of both. But, what caused that for you? Was it part of the time or the era that you were living in? Was it something that happened in your life that kind of led to that? 3 months prior, I had been diagnosed HIV positive. And it was suggested to me to see a psychologist. So my
primary care physician at the time suggested, he recommended a psychologist. I saw a psychologist. She had me take a 30, it was a questionnaire with 30 questions on it. I tried to get it over as quickly as I could. I was very uncomfortable. I didn't want to see this woman, white woman. And she immediately wanted me to to take antidepressant medication. And I didn't trust being narcotized, for my mental health. So I refused to not take it. Plus, I didn't think I really needed it. At that time, I thought therapy was for rich, crazy white people. So, but I had a friend who also lived with HIV, and she suggested that I seek out a therapist. And so, because of her example, and I was attracted to her spirit, I took her suggestion, and it had a tremendous influence on my life. I'm glad I did.
And it's also interesting that another thing that we often talk about is when it comes to therapy, it's so female dominated, right? Did you feel in any way when you started your journey that, okay, maybe I might need a male therapist? Is there a benefit to that in your experience for men to seek out male therapists to help them with, it might not be maybe not depression, but just a therapeutic journey to get you to a place where you are healed from your wounds. Yeah.
Well, at that time in my life, I still didn't believe that I had a choice. I was just following the direction of my primary care physician. So when I got to the clinic and there was this woman, my first therapist was a female from Bosnia. She was in her 20s, heterosexual. I had never been in therapy before. But she told me she was there to assist me with the quality of my life. And she was very pleasant. She was very respectful. She was kind. She was affirming. And so we had a relationship on and off for maybe about 3 years. And as I began to open my mind and my heart and to think critically about what was going on inside of me, I began to realize that I wasn't limited to one gender or one culture, so I have had a few Black male therapists. Okay. And I think therapy can be beneficial, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yes, sir.
And I think sometimes we tend to shame men who don't go to therapy. It's not for everybody, and it should not be a litmus test for healing, liberation, restoration. It should not be, okay, if I don't go to therapy, it means I'm in denial, or I don't want help, or I don't want to get better, or I don't want to improve that shouldn't have, but that's how it comes off sometimes, especially with social media. Even with Black male therapists, they tend to sometimes can be very rigid when it comes to a Black man who's considering what to do, where to go, who to talk to.
Oh, I love that. And, you're touching on something that we actually spoke about on our most recent episode, that the approach to male problems are sometimes, like you say, very rigid, right? Maybe they don't fit the culture. Maybe they don't fit the person's experience because there's a study, I think, from the American Psychology Society where they had to put out a report to say that, hey, we might have made some errors in terms of treating Black trauma, treating our Black patients, because we just didn't understand just what's going on with them. We really didn't understand the experience, right? So when you hear that, and when you see now that there's so many different modalities of access to therapy and ways of dealing with it, what other alternatives have you kind of explored outside of talk therapy?
Well, in addition to therapy, there are people who are life coaches, and they can be very helpful. Meeting with them once a week, twice a month. There are support groups that people are in daily, weekly, monthly to help them with like-minded people, like-minded challenges, like-minded issues. Some people use their faith-based practices You know, whether it's a church, a mosque, a synagogue, or a temple, and they speak to people there, people who are in positions of authority or power or dominance sometimes. They talk to them. But historically and culturally, this has not been the practice of Black people in this country. You know, we just have not seen a professional to talk about our beliefs, our feelings, our reactions, our perception. That's just not has been our experience. That's why I call it cultural silence, because this goes back centuries.
Yeah.
It may take centuries to unlearn all of the damage that we have done to ourselves. I mean, Stephen Biko says that the greatest tool of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. You know, Bob Marley says that emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our mind. And so there's a lot of work that we have to do as individuals, but we need people like yourself to show an example where there is a space that is safe, that's not threatening. You won't be harmed, you won't be judged, you won't be laughed at, you won't be ridiculed, right? Your homies won't call you names.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we think about who's gonna hurt us. We don't use the word hurt, but we don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be ridiculed. And we may not have these languages, but we know that there's something that's, people are going to talk about us in a crazy kind of way that we don't want that, so we just avoid it.
You know, when you're speaking of that, of being afraid of being hurt and putting yourself out there, there's this idea of, you know, a Black man or a man standing out in communities that we're from. Like, I'm from the hood, you know. So standing out in the hood is kind of a thing where it's, okay, like, who do you think you are, right? You become sort of a target for people. But, you know, when it comes to stuff that we're talking about, like mental health, a lot of people find that, like, okay, that's a little bit too sensitive. I don't want to talk about that. And you mentioned something that when you're out there selling your book, you get a lot of men who just walk by you, they don't even pay you any attention. But you have women who come to you and they're like, man, what's going on there? What you got there? And they're interested. So do you ever find that a lot of men are not interested in connecting with other men on that level, whereas women are so open to it? Because I feel like they want to know more about us. Like, but what's going on with the guys, right? What's going on with my husband or my son or whatnot? How are you experiencing that whole phenomenon?
Well, I mean, yesterday you talked about stigma and how mental health is stigmatized. You know, our intellect has been stigmatized since we've been here. We're not considered to be intelligent or intellectual or bright or studious. You know, there are very few places in America where you can learn about Black male studies. Yeah. You know, contemporary gender theorists, women, feminists, they've kind of like dominated, you know, the stratosphere, and they're doing all the talking and all the, you know, the sharing, sometimes all the writing. And so Black men are aware that we are perceived as less than human, less than intelligent. And so to acknowledge that there may be something I need to talk about, it's almost like an acknowledgement of failure. It's an acknowledgement of guilt, acknowledgement of shame, acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just to say, let me talk about mental health. The word mental health has a taboo, a very urban, degrading taboo to it. It's almost like saying, I'm not a human being.
Yes, sir.
So to ask someone to engage when that's not what they have ever done before in their whole life, like I never had therapy before. I didn't even know what to talk about. We didn't even talk about HIV. We talked about the little boy, right? The little boy who grew up feeling unworthy, uncomfortable, inadequate, inferior, betrayed, disappointed, ashamed, misunderstood, unappreciated. I had a lot of conflicting feelings as a child, and I had nowhere to go with it. And I know I'm not alone with these feelings, but it's hard to be what you can't see. So if my father and my uncle and my brother not talking about how they feel, I'm not gonna be the only person in my family talking about how I feel. I don't have the kind of courage that Dr. King had. I'm not that dude. I'm not that dude. You know what I mean? And you see what happened to them. They told the truth about how they felt, and they died before the age of 40. We see this happening every day. So we go to work, we go to school, and we don't tell people how we feel. So we drink, we smoke, we gamble, we eat, we do everything to damage the inside, and there's nothing left. There's nothing left.
Man.
So thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Man, I really appreciate you for recognizing that and affirming me in that way, because it's interesting what you say about the words mental health. When I started, we've got a group as well. We've got about 40 men on our WhatsApp group, and we meet about twice a month, right? But when we started, I was like, we want to call it a men's mental health support group. But I know if I put men and mental health together, that's gonna get men feeling like, we're not going there. So we ended up just calling it a men's group, right? A men's support group. And then we started getting some traction on it. But interesting enough, I've also seen how men who wouldn't want to talk about the stuff, not comment on social media, for example, but they'll tap me on the shoulder when they see me on the streets or when they meet me wherever, like, hey, man, I caught this episode. I'm like, well, I didn't even know you listened. Like, trust me, I'm listening. So there's sort of a danger to putting yourself out there as someone who's vulnerable, someone who has feelings, someone who can articulate those feelings for that matter. And like you said, now our leaders spoke truth and they died for it. So in essence, you could also say that speaking the truth is also dangerous, right? Because you become a target, depending on what you're talking about. So how can we then, start building this language for ourselves or these communities to get men more interested in the conversation? And not even in a way of listening in, because I think we've all been listening, we've all been reading, but in a way that you also contribute, because by sharing your story, you're also allowing the next man to also kind of open up and be like, man, if Mark can talk about that, if KG can talk about that, I can definitely have my 2 cents in there, right? Do you think there's I know there's no formula to it, there's no science to it, but what are some of the sort of easier steps that we can take to allow our brothers to also open themselves up? Yeah.
Well, we've actually had, in our community, we've had what we call therapeutic conversations, right? So we gather in a locker room, at the park, in the backseat of a car, at a spiritual ceremony. We get together, just talking, walking down the street, at a neighborhood gathering, at a picnic, at a barbecue. We have these rituals where Black men gather and we talk, but we don't talk emotionally. We talk about women, alcohol, jobs, degrees, cars, houses. Not that that's bad or wrong, but we just don't talk about how we feel. We talk about the weather, talk about the game, talk about food, you know what I mean? But like to tell another man, I feel hurt, like you said, that takes so much courage, It takes courage to tell the truth, but it takes integrity to live the truth. And I'm not saying that we are without integrity, but we just don't have people, Black men, to model how to express ourselves in ways in which we can still reclaim our dignity, right? And our self-respect, and still tell you, I feel hurt. You hurt my feelings. Because when you're a little boy and you're hurt, you get feminized, right? And you learn that it's not right to talk about how you feel, because then you'll be called a punk, a faggot, or a sissy. So not only is your sexuality questioned, your manhood is questioned. Little girls don't have to go through that.
Yeah.
The little girl starts crying. No one calls her a lesbian. right?
Oh, man.
Right? But when a little boy cries, he's called a punk, a faggot, a sissy. And so you grow up hearing this and you learn, I can't tell nobody how. So it becomes the stigma, the secret, the suffering, the shame, the silence. And you grow up and that becomes your default coping mechanism. I can't tell you how I feel because you're going to hurt me, you're going to laugh at me. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing, what we're trying to do is to create spaces and places where men do feel safe, and they trust the environment, they trust the entity, and they can learn how to trust their instincts. Mm. Mm. And again, we have centuries of unlearning to do. I mean, there's something unique about Black pain. Man. It's unlike any other type of pain on the planet. Nobody has endured what we have endured. So for me and you here, to be talking about mental health now is really a threat to the institutions that we are governed by. They don't want us to do this. They don't want us to talk about how we feel. Just go to work, pay your bills. You know what I'm saying?
Stay in your place, man. Stay in your place.
And LeBron James was told, shut up and dribble. But what did he do? He decided to have a documentary called Shut Up and Dribble. So he took that anger and he made something productive and effective and valuable for other Black men. That's the challenge to me, is how to deal with the rage and the resentment.
Because we've got something going on in our country right now, you know, when you're talking about just the pain that we've been through. A certain political party, I'm not going to mention their name, but if you go on the socials, you'll catch them out, you know. They were chanting the song that was basically reminding Black people that, hey, man, you know, we're up against this machine, right? And for us to fight this machine, we have to go out in not in a blaze of glory, go out shooting, but we're going to sing the song just to hype us up, to remind us that we've got a greater enemy that we're fighting. But when you hear now, even the owners of certain social medias, they're looking at this and they're saying that, hold up, South Africa is starting this genocide against white people, you know. These political parties are getting people riled up. It's going to get violent. So I see that and I'm like, but no, that's not what the song means. That's not what that's not the insinuation, right? We're talking about a song that made us feel a certain way. And if you look at the rally that was going on there, it was kind of reminiscent of what happened back in the days, having Black people come together to talk about this is what we need to do to change and to move the country forward. So, you know, I can identify when you say that our struggle, our pain is something that certain people feel very uncomfortable with when we start sharing it. Because let's be honest, some of the causes of these traumas and these pains were caused by the very same people who are feeling very uncomfortable about what we have to share. And another thing that you said to me was, you know, being a Black man in America, you don't feel safe. And I added to that and I'm like, sure, I'm in South Africa where the majority of us are Black, but I also don't even feel safe, right? So there's a fear that we live with as Black men, I feel, globally. Even if you in Haiti, you know, in Jamaica, where it's mostly Black people, you still have those Black men experiencing all of these traumas that, you know, we kind of feel universally. So I know I went on a bit of a rant there.
Oh, no, it's okay.
But, you know, what I'm trying to get at, though, is these communities that we're building, what's the sort of, can I call it a word, a ritual, a practice that we can engage with more just to get us to loosen up on the fear, right? And lead with a bit of courage in the things that we do. Yeah.
What are some practices that we can do to deal with the fear? Well, for me, prayer is a very powerful tool. I pray every day. I begin every day with prayer. You know, I ask God for his will to be done. You know, it took me a long time to believe in a loving God. I'm not a religious person. I respect people that have religious beliefs, but I really value my spirituality. So I pray every day. Meditation is very important to me. If it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, quieting my mind, either listening to nature or music or just nothing at all. That's very helpful to me. I don't do it now, but I used to do yoga. Have you ever done yoga before?
I've done some yoga with my partner, like a couple of times, but never by myself. And I haven't really gotten into it like that to like say that, I've done some yoga. You know, I've done some YouTube things here and there.
Okay. Yeah, yoga, acupuncture has been very helpful, either full point or body point. I think journaling is a very powerful tool, you know, and I would encourage people to get a piece of paper and a pencil, or you can even use your phone, you know, for 15 minutes. 15 minutes and just write down, I feel, right? And just let whatever comes out, just put it on. And after 15 minutes, you just stop, right? It's an exercise, and it's a way to lessen the load, you know, because pain shared is pain lessened. And so just to get it out of our mind, out of our body, because pain is stored in the body. I got to get it out of my body because it's in here, right? Pain is part of our biological inheritance. It will never end. The sensation will never end because it's part of our biological inheritance. So I need to get rid of it. I need to let it go, right? Send it on its way. So just writing about the pain, you know, can help me to exercise the demons, the trauma, the suffering, the uncertainty, the anxiety, the nervousness, you know, because most of us are not at peace 24 hours a day.
I think that's, if I find a man who's at peace at 24 hours a day, I want to live with that man, because I'm like,
right. Because you talked about being in a Zen state, right? It's a state, but is it 24 hours a day? I mean, we got to do a reality. Yes, you know, everybody, my great-grandmother was 97 years old. She said, no one leaves this world unscathed. So everybody hurts. It hurts to be human. So yeah, prayer, meditation, exercise is a great way to deal with these issues. Nutrition, eating healthy. Like you, I put on some weight. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 5 months ago. I lost 15 pounds. I've been working out twice a week, and it was reversed. So my A1C dropped. So I don't have diabetes. I don't have to see an endocrinologist. I don't have to take medication because I did something, right?
Yes, sir.
So I can pray, but I also got to take some action, right? I can't just give it to God and sit here and watch Hulu. I got to do something. Like you exercise with your bike. I got to do something, man. I got to move my body. I can't sit on my ass and just watch TV all day and expect to lose 50 pounds. You know what I mean? I got to engage the body and the mind and spirit is the holistic trinity, you know, so yeah.
Oh, I love that. And you mentioned something about getting in touch and trusting our instincts. I wrote about this on my Twitter just the other day, where I said, you know, I wanna live more, or I wanna learn how to lean into my intuition a little bit more and trust myself, right? Because conversations I have with a lot of guys, friends of mine, and men in my circle, or in the support group that we have, you know, you'll find that a lot of men want to do stuff. A lot of men want to try stuff. You want to start a business, you know, you want to change your life, you want to exercise more, you want to do stuff. But back to what we're speaking about, there's just this thing that's keeping you from fully exploring your being, right? So in terms of intuition, and I know you spoke about journaling and prayer, but how can we use our intuition? How can we lean into it? What can we do to trust that, to guide us?
That's a good question. You know, my spirit tells me different things at different times. And for a long time, I was programmed and conditioned and socialized to not trust my instincts. that somehow intuition was a women's thing. You know, there's women's intuition. That's what we're told, right? Mm-hmm. So subconsciously, I must have believed that only women have intuition. So when there's something on the inside telling me this is right, this is wrong, who am I listening to, right? And if I think it's wrong, do I have the courage or the humility to pick up the phone and tell you this is what I'm thinking? A lot of times, you know, as a black man, we may not want to do that because, again, it leads me to be vulnerable. I'm open to being heard, to being criticized, judged, questioned. Like, why are you hanging out with him? Why are you wearing that color? What are you doing at 1 o'clock in the morning? You know what I mean? Just basic, simple stuff. We get constantly people on our backs about stuff. And, you know, what do you mean you want to be a dancer or a sculptor? That's what women do. So our creative energy and spirit, it gets stifled because people have these ideas around manhood. Man shouldn't cry, man shouldn't wear pink, and so forth and so on. So I think it takes courage just to tell somebody, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling. And the more I do it, the more it becomes discipline. And cultivating self-discipline will allow me to act on my intuition so I don't end up harming myself and living with regret. I don't want to regret not going to South Africa, right? I don't want to be 85 years old and say, well, you know, I was thinking about that when I was 60, but I never went. You know? Yeah. And that's the worst kind of death, right? That's the worst kind of way. Yeah. Okay. And you know, there's this thing about, you know, moving in silence. And moving in silence for me is it's almost like, yeah, I get it. You know, you can move in silence, but what does it mean for the people around you, right? Like, does that mean you don't trust anyone and you gotta keep secrets? and what does that even lead to, right? You might miss out on stuff, or you might end up doing the wrong thing, like you say. But because I never kind of engaged with anyone to kind of like, hey man, you know, I have a feeling, but you know, what should I do? So there's this lack of trust that we spoke of amongst us as men. And what do you think causes that? And what can we do to kind of, trust each other a bit more and build better bonds with our fellow brothers, right? Wow. That's a really powerful question, AG.
I'm putting you on a spot with that one, but
yeah. That's a really powerful question. You know, the lack of trust. I mean, you know, we live in a white supremacist world, and the images that we have of Black men are not loving and kind. And from the time we have been here to today, we have been programmed and socialized to be mistrustful of others. We use words like suspect, right? You know, so you watch the news and the suspect is a young Black man, a young Black man, a young Black man. You know, you got the prison industrial complex, which for me is just a place for white men to act out their homoerotic fantasies. You know, that's another conversation.
Well, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that as well. Yeah.
So then, you know, there's so much that we have to deal with: police brutality, you know, the health disparity, you know, the food deserts, poverty. Sometimes we grow up in homes where people don't ask you how you feel. Again, when I'm not talking about how I feel, how can I cultivate trust? You don't tell me how you feel. How can I learn to trust you? And then if you betrayed me or you were dishonest or you hurt me, then I really don't feel trustful, right? Feeling abandoned, feeling rejected, not having two parents at home, that can cause a sense of mistrust. You know, sexual abuse can lead to mistrust. Drug addiction, alcoholism, unemployment, rejection, you know, there's so many reasons. That's a very powerful question because it's very layered. and very nuanced. And it's not for everybody. Everyone has their own journey on this planet. But I think it helps when people actually show you how to trust through their personal example. Nice. Just like you and I having this conversation, we don't know each other, but we're developing a connection, and it takes a moment, Not going to be automatic.
I love that, man. Because it's I think that the theme around this is just putting yourself out there, right? I'm learning with my journey as well that it kind of takes, like you're saying, it takes a bit of time and unlearning, right? For example, I grew up not knowing my father, so I had a lot of distrust for men until a certain point where I started seeing that, okay, I can let my hair down, I can show, I can trust this man, even though I don't know too much about him, but so far he's showed me that he's willing to go certain lengths for me. So then there's a connection that builds over time with that, right? But one of the other things that I often get confused with is when people start maturing or growing into a certain levels of success or certain levels of family dynamics. You maybe get married and you kind of feel like, I can't relate with my friends in the same way because they're not married or they're not in the same tax bracket. So they might look at me as a prize as opposed to the friend I've always known and the friend I've always been cordial with. So that also forms a bit of that mistrust, right? And I kind of feel like for anyone who's listening to this, if you're experiencing something like that, everything for me starts on a conversation. Like you're saying, going to someone and telling them how you feel. Like, man, I kind of feel like we're drifting apart a little bit here, and I might be wrong, but this is an assessment of mine that maybe because you are now in a family situation and I'm not part of that. I want to learn from that. Maybe the approach could be, yo, man, teach me about this. I'm thinking of starting my own family. What can I take from you? And I think if we use that kind of language of not like, you're ostracizing us, but like include us in that space so we kind of get to understand what you're also going through. And I think we can trust each other a little bit more. So that's my little analysis on how we can build better bonds with each other. Have conversations that are not confrontational. You leaving us, you made it, and you left the hood. But like, yo, man, how do we get out the hood, bro? Okay, you able to get to CEO level at your company. All right, cool. How did you do it? What did you study? Or is there maybe we studied the same thing? There's a personality trait of mine that I'm not aware of that you maybe know as a friend of mine. You could tell me that, hey, KG, I think you're a little bit too informal. You need to brush up on your English, and that could maybe bring us closer, right? And that could get me a promotion where it's like, okay, man, Mark told me something so dope. I'm gonna actually take that and employ it in my life, and that makes my situation better. Then I can trust you with other stuff, right? So I think, guys, for you guys listening, for you listening on your own, for you listening with a crew of friends, look at each other and speak about what's going on in your lives in a way that pours into the next man's life, and you don't only individualize everything. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm seeing. And you might have asked me this yesterday when we were talking about communities, right? Is there a unity amongst us, which also pours into a bit of trust? And I feel like the unity lacks because we move and then we leave our friends behind, but because we feel like they don't kind of fit into that new world that we're in. They don't fit the new standard that we've kind of put for ourselves, right? What's your take on that?
Well, you mentioned the word unity. I know during the 60s and early 70s, during the civil rights movements, Black people in this country were starting to really cultivate an awakening and a sense of unity, a sense of togetherness, all being on one accord. And our leaders were summarily just taken. And before you know it, we were at odds again, but there was a time when we really were starting to build something that was sustainable as a community, in terms of the way we speak, the way we dress, the music we listen to, the books that we would read, the schools we went to. There was a certain harmony, I grew up with the Blackstone Radios, the Black Panther Party, and I saw how they fed and clothed and educated the youth, which was the opposite of what we saw on television in terms of the news. All you saw were guns, and so we were taught to believe they were violent people, but that wasn't the case. There's a difference between self-determination and state-sanctioned violence. You know what I mean? So we do have that history. It didn't last very long. And I think people are still waiting for another Malcolm X to show up or another Harriet Tubman to show up. And that's not going to happen. I think we really have to look to ourselves individually, which could lead to a collective, and learn how to find ways to trust each other. But again, it really does take somebody to model that type of behavior.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen in the home, it's very challenging to find where can I go to feel a sense of trust, a sense of safety, a sense of affirmation where I can really just be who I am or who I want to be. What happens to a dream deferred? You know what I mean? It dries up like a raisin in the sun. And so we need spaces and places where we can cultivate that energy and learn how to just do the right thing for the right reason.
Man, I love that. And, for me, I come from a quiet family. We church folks here. We Roman Catholic. My grandmother, as far as I knew her, every day I see her, she's either praying, she's got a hymn book, or she's doing something with her hands or whatever, but she's singing or humming some kind of spiritual song, whatever, So that's a kind of modeling that I got, right? That, hey, everything that we have, if you have a problem, take it to God. But growing up, I had posters of Tupac on my wall, right? Before I even knew his music. So I had a picture of Tupac, no shirt, and I saw all these tattoos. And next thing I hear, Hit 'Em Up and all of these songs, I'm like, wow, this is really wild, right? And that was my sort of introduction to America and just the world outside. Of course, I saw people in the streets and that, but the impact of media for me was so much stronger than the people I saw outside, because I spent so much time on the television when my parents were not around and that type of thing. And I spent a lot of time alone at home as well. But through the media, I then found, different expressions, different people, right? Different or sort of alternative media where it wasn't all violent, where it wasn't all sensationalist type of programming, but then it was very educational, very, it builds a person, right? It forces you to think critically. It forces you to sort of look at things and like, okay, I see that, I don't disagree with it, but then I have more questions about that, right? For me to make an informed sort of decision about whatever it is that I'm seeing. So how do you think media literacy or the importance of media literacy right now, given the fact that, what's on our television screens, what's playing in our radios, what's playing in the cars is not the most positive messaging, right? And I'm saying this with all due respect because there are a lot of people that I still listen to, like the KRS Ones, still one of my favorites. I still, at the same time, I listen to very violent music, but just for the sake of entertainment. But I get that there's a whole sort of spectrum you have to go through as a human being to get to a certain level of understanding why both exist or why we need a bit of both, right? So what do you think we can gain from being media literate and also being critical thinkers in society?
Okay, so I'm going to read you a quote that I found to be very, very helpful from Professor Leonard Jeffries, who has taught at City College University. Mm-hmm. He says, whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem. self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. So you have a platform, you have a podcast, you have a space of autonomy, and you're using it for a greater good. That's not always going to be the case. Some people want attention, some people want money, some people want fame, some people want sex, some people want drugs, whatever, right? But what you're doing right now is very powerful. 10 years from now, we can look back and say, this is what KG did, right? Maybe I want to do this. There might be a 10-year-old boy watching you right now saying, I want to do what you're doing, you know, because you don't see it on BET, you don't see it on CNN, you don't see it on MSNBC. You don't see people telling the truth. You don't see people speaking in their own language, being self-determining, you know. So social media, to me, is a double-edged sword. Because now I'm in New York, you're in South Africa. That's powerful. That could not have happened 25 years ago.
Yes, sir.
So you got people on Facebook with 10,000 friends, and they're still lonely as fuck. You know what I'm saying? So it gives you the illusion that I know him, I know her, but do we really have a relationship? Do you know my heart? Do you know my pain? Do you know my joy? Do you know my insecurities? Do you know my fears, my aspirations? You know, so media literacy is a tool that can be used to for compassion, but also for condemnation. And sometimes we tend to tear people down because we have a mic in front of us and we think we got power, right? And so our opinions are used as fact. So you got people talking about stuff on television. We think that they are intelligent or they're experts. They're just sharing their opinion. People get paid to talk about their opinion on TV every day. But does it benefit my personal growth and spiritual development? So I think it's important that we use media and that we learn how to use it to make the world a better place, to benefit our communities, to empower, to enrich, to uplift, to edify, to educate, to inform, to engage, to disagree, but to have conversations, like you said, manned-up conversations. You know, that's really important, and it's the wave of the future. I mean, who was doing a podcast 20 years ago? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And that's just how we can. You know, people are not reading books the way they used to. Magazines, newspapers. Everybody's on their phone, right? When I get on the bus or a train, the first thing people do is they pull out their phone. People go to school on their phone. People go to work on their phone. People buy food on their phone. People watch movies on their phone, right? That's where the media is right now. This little bitty thing that's where people are at. So it does help, but it needs to be monitored as well.
Yes, sir. Man. And you talk about these images, man. You know, I want to go back to something now, the prison industrial complex. That's you know, when I see, and it's mostly from American media, when we talk about these rappers now, that's like a one-way ticket to jail right now because of just the insensitive nature of some of these songs, you know, or some of these lifestyles, right? And looking here in South Africa, I wouldn't say, you know, the music is as violent as some of the music in the States, whereas our music is more jovial. You know, it's about bringing people together, having fun, obviously partying and drinking and that type of lifestyles. But it doesn't lead a lot of people to jail, as I've experienced, as opposed to what you see in the States. But is that something that's also part of, you know, the long line of history that Black men have always been subjected to, you know, taken to jail for selling 2 packs of crack or selling a bag of weed, whereas like a white man will shoot someone down in the streets and then will make all kinds of excuses and maybe get them off on a lighter sentence, you know? Does that whole experience, doesn't that actually turn the kids away from engaging with this music, because it seems like that just keeps on growing and more people are going to jail. I'm pretty sure right now as we speak, there are 2 to 5 rappers who are in jail, who are going through some court trial and all kinds of stuff. It's like, but why don't you guys learn from the previous guy who did it? Similar to what you're saying, you know, some kid could be watching this interview right now, this conversation right now, and be like, man, that's so powerful. I want to do that. What is the attraction of this violent nature of some of our music and cultures? Yeah.
You know, I think it's unfair to paint a broad brush when it comes to the hip hop community, rappers in general. I mean, people go to jail every day.
Yes, sir.
But they don't get on the news because they're not Lil Wayne, Lil Baby, Lil Nas X. People go to jail. People in my neighborhood, people go to jail every day, right? People commit crimes every day. But the media, the white-owned, patriarchal, privileged media is invested in our dehumanization. So they're going to show what happened to Bill Cosby or R. Kelly, even though Harvey Weinstein is doing the same thing. You know what I mean? So there's really no balance. There's no fairness. There's no equality when it comes to what we see. You know, when Richard Nixon was president in 1970, he coined the term law and order. And he decided that drugs was America's #1 problem. So the Nixon administration started to build prisons. Because when I was a kid, there were not a lot of prisons in this country, right? He actually had money in his budget for mental health and for drug treatment. That money was shifted to the military and the police. That became our thinking on how to handle conflict, disagreement, right? You put somebody in a prison, you put them behind bars, and every president became, let's get tough on crime, right? So now we have this prison industrial complex where we have corporations making billions of dollars and mostly Black men in those prisons in lily white neighborhoods where it's their sole source of revenue. Remove the prison, you remove the economy, right? There was something called a disparity of 100 to 1. So if a white guy is found with 100 grams of cocaine and a Black guy is caught with 1 gram of crack, the sentencing is not the same, right? So we're in prison for 30 years, he gets 30 days of community service, right? That's just how it's been. When Obama became president, he reduced it from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1, but it's still not fair. I mean, the laws in New York State are based on apartheid, you know? So the prison industrial complex only benefits the corporations and the institutions who benefit from the money that they get to build license plates and toilet paper. You know, they get all these contracts. And they're building all these things, and then they get paid 3 cents an hour. Then you come out and you can't get a job, can't vote, you can't get public housing, you can't get food stamps, right? And it's a vicious cycle all over again. So it's not just rappers who are violent. I think that's unfair because violence actually started with the Europeans, right? There are some, right, who are not behaving correctly. Listen, I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe in prison, right? I believe in alternatives to incarceration. So I don't believe that prison or jail is a solution. I don't feel safer because there's a prison 3 blocks away from where I live at. I think the community should be more involved in policing. Because remember, the police came from slave patrols, right? That's where they come from. They don't come from the community saying that we get police officers. It comes from slave patrols patrolling the plantation, you know, officers, officials, and now it's a whole big industry now. And I think we need to dismantle the entire police department as we know in the United States.
Man. And you think the idea of community policing would work though in this day and age?
It's starting to happen. There's in Minnesota, it's happening. The community is involved in. See, there's a difference between discipline and punishment, right? As kids, we get punished when you're black. When you're white, you get disciplined. So a white person may have a consultation with the teacher. A black person goes to jail and gets arrested. Can't pay the bill. That's racist, right? So you're in jail not because you've been convicted, it's because you can't pay the bill. That's not right.
That's why we got more poor people in jail than rich, right?
I mean, it's one of the reasons, but again, there's this whole idea of prison and jail is modern day slavery. And prison and jails in the United States have not proven to make our society safer. And the people, you can't be rehabilitated if you've never been habilitated, right? So if your humanity is not valued before you go in, it's going to be worse when you come out.
Man. This is I don't usually get to have a conversation like this that sort of bridges sort of generations, right? Because you've lived through times where things were working, where communities were united, like you said, and then you saw the whole change where everything just kind of came apart. Do you think there's hope though in our societies, in our communities?
I do believe in hope. I believe in optimism. Because you and I are doing something that wasn't being done 50 years ago. So we can leave a legacy for the next generation to reimagine, right, what life could be like as a black man in a racist society, using our intellect, using our hearts, using our minds, using our voices, and our energy and our resources to, cultivate places and spaces and people and resources to do the right thing for the right reason. There is hope. There's always hope. There's always hope. Hope means hearing other people's experience, right? In New York City, Mario Cuomo became governor. He was governor for 12 years. Before he was governor, in the history of this state, there had only been 35 prisons. In over 300 years of New York State's existence, there had only been 35 prisons. In 12 years, his administration built 38 prisons.
Wow.
In 12 years, they built more prisons than the whole entire, since we've been here, right? And so that, when you imprison the mind, it doesn't matter what the bars, you take off the shackles, the mind is still oppressed, like Stephen Biko said. That's right. But that has been America's solution to crime, drugs, violence, is to put a black man in a prison, to watch him naked, right? Strip him further of his humanity, which has never been recognized in the first place, because again, we're seen as 3/5 of a human being. And it tears away the spirit, right? And once you break someone's spirit, it's really hard to recover and to get some type of restoration and resolution to what you've been going through. That's why we got to talk about how we feel so we don't end up in those places.
And talk about the rape of men in these prisons. And I mean, you can go back to the plantation days anyway. Men were also getting raped there by, I guess, the people who are watching over them, the slave owners or the people on the actual fields, right? The police.
And the women too. The women were raping our boys and men, but nobody wants to talk about that. Because let me tell you something. At that time, we didn't have a gender, right? We were not men and boys and girls and women. We were considered as animals, beasts, criminal, and savage. So the word gender was associated with family and race, not biology or sex. And women, white women, were complicit in the patriarchy, right? Patriarchy is rooted in genealogy, right? It has nothing to do with gender. We think of patriarchy as all men benefiting at the hands of all women. That's not true. That's not where it comes from, right? So feminism is a benefactor of patriarchy because white women benefited from the colonialism and imperialism of their husbands, right? They benefited from teaching us, well, not teaching us, but training us how to think and behave, right? So our own mothers were not there to protect us and to teach us and guide us because they were on the fields. So where were the kids? The kids, they were working, but they were also in the house, and the white women were telling them what to do, how to do it. That has to be unlearned. But nobody wants to talk about white women being sexually violent. So when you think of the Me Too movement, you automatically think of a black man sexually assaulting a black woman.
Yes, sir. I mean,
we somehow have a monopoly on that behavior. That's not the history. That's not the history.
I mean, I often look at what happened with R. Kelly, right? And, you know, we can have our own a long debate about that. But I kind of feel like the way that was handled, where, I mean, he did his things behind closed doors with certain people involved, all knowing exactly what's going on there. But when he got arrested and taken through what he was taken through, it's like, well, let's shame him by himself, right? We can talk about the people involved, but let's use this black man as an example to the rest of you black men who are doing this thing, that if you're going to go out this way, this is exactly what's going to happen to you, right? I don't think, like you say, people get arrested every day, but we don't see that happening to white men at the same rate that's happening to black men, and especially black men who have influence in our communities, that we feel like are somewhat heroic, you know, to reach the level of success that they have, to have the influence that they have. So I can understand what you're saying there about where the patriarchy comes from and why we hardly look at the black or the white women and say, but you had a hand in this. And you also supporting quite a lot of noise on the ground about black men being violent, about black men being unruly, about black men subjecting black women to all kinds of ill treatment, right? There's some events that I've attended. There's some courses that I've been privy to. I've kind of listened to stuff and I'm like, wow, I've never heard my mother speak like that, you know, but I'm hearing young black women talk about the stuff. And maybe it's a conversation for me to have with my mother and find out, like, but did you experience half of these things? Or are they taking what white women have gone through and they're kind of saying that, well, because they've gone through this, then I'm pretty sure my future husband, who I don't even know is capable of doing this stuff, he's probably going to abuse and rape me and subject me to, cooking and cleaning in the kitchen and not even want to raise his sons. You know, it's so ridiculous when I hear some of these things, but it's the unfortunate nature of conversations that are going on now between black men and black women, right? So in all of this that's going on, and why I asked you if there's hope for our societies, the one question that we always ask is what's one thing that you could suggest, or that you've tried, or that you know that works for you, to help unite a family, you know, to help unite a man and a woman, for them to have a conversation that can move them beyond the conversations that are happening on the ground, right? Because you always need someone to just look up and like, okay, no, but I see what's going on here. But if I look up, I'm seeing something completely different in the horizon as opposed to what's happening here. So, you know, for a man or a woman listening to this right now, when it comes out, what would you want them to kind of do for each other to kind of get out of the noise and sort of, you know, deal with their own situation as it happens for them?
I would encourage people to have more conversations about their mental health, you know. So instead of saying to somebody, good morning, Ask them, how was your mental health today? Right? Because a lot of times, we don't ask people how they feel. We ask them what they do. You go to a social place, what do you do? What do you do? That's the first thing we say to people, what do you do? So people want to know about what you do for a living and what school you want to go to. Because we value education and employment more than we value our own emotional well-being, right? So that shift has to change. Instead of saying, what do you do? Ask people, how do you feel? And listen. Follow up with another question. How do you feel emotionally about this situation or that situation? And really engage people and try to be more intentional about it. It takes courage. It's not natural. It's not something that we learned from our grandparents. You know what I mean? And most of us don't live in households where mental health is a part of our natural discussion. But we can learn and we can be the example. I can pick up the phone and call my friend. I have a friend who just had surgery. How are you feeling today? How's your spirit today? What's going through your mind? That's just one thing we can do is to really have a conversation where our emotional and mental and psychological well-being is really important.
Man, I love that, man. Well, my brother Mark, I'm gonna have to let you go, but we've been talking about this wonderful book, man. And, I know you've got people in other countries, not just South Africa, who are listening to this. How do they get a hold of the book?
So again, the book is called Cultural Silence and Wounded Souls, Black Men Speak About Mental Health. The book is on Amazon. And the link is on my Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter page.
Yes, sir. And we're
So
going to share all
social
of
media.
that.
Say it again?
I'm saying we're going to share all of that in the show notes on the pod, so on the video as well. So while you're listening, while you're watching, scroll down on the show notes, get yourself connected to Mark as well. Don't just, buy the book. I think talk to Mark, because this is a real good brother. You'll have some very interesting conversations.
I also want to mention, KG, that I have a website as well. culturalsilencewoundedsouls.com. That's one word, culturalsilencewoundedsouls.com. People go to the website, there's a media page. On the media page, there's conversation, there's a documentary, there's interview, there's a lecture, there's music, there's poetry. So there's the media page is lit, and then the resources page has all types of books you can read, helplines you can call, podcasts, videos, organizations. So yeah, check out the website as well.
Man, go ahead and do the right things, guys. Peace and love to all my people listening to this. It's been another installment of Man Up Conversations. We'll catch you on the flip side. Peace and love, man.